The European Union is looking into ways to stop migrants from coming to its shores. One possibility would be to get other countries to stop migrants from taking the deadly route via the Mediterranean in exchange for generous payments. With Libya, however, a North African country divided after a civil war, that concept has apparently led to human rights violations.
This is the Libyan Coast Guard, drawing up alongside a European rescue ship in the Mediterranean Sea. What happens next has been called outrageous and unacceptable by the crew of the rescue vessel, and deeply concerning by the EU's border protection agency, Frontex. The Libyan patrol opened fire on the ship, which belongs to the European aid organisation SOS Méditerranée. The crew said they didn't understand what was going on until windows began exploding over their heads.
For 20 minutes, they fired a barrage of bullets at us, seriously endangering the lives of our crew and the survivors we had on board. Fortunately, no one was injured, but our ship and rescue equipment were heavily damaged.
The Libyan Coast Guard claimed it only fired warning shots into the air. But the aid organisation, which just before the attack had rescued 87 people, mainly from Sudan, and was reportedly searching for another migrant boat in distress, says it's taking legal action. It's demanding accountability, not just from those who fired the shots, but also from, quote, European states and institutions who cooperate with the Libyan Coast Guard. Libya has long been a starting point for migrants trying to get to Europe, and the country's Coast Guard receives training, funding and equipment from the EU as part of efforts to intercept and deter the many thousands willing to risk their lives making the journey. Critics like Amnesty International say such efforts amount to complicity in human rights violations and show a lack of regard for the lives and dignity of refugees and migrants. The work of rescue vessels like the Ocean Viking is being made more difficult, with some countries such as Italy accusing NGOs of aiding human trafficking rather than saving lives. What's more, the EU is preparing to tighten rules on migration, despite a drop of more than 20% in the number of asylum requests and irregular arrivals in the first 6 months of 2025, mainly because of a decline in the number of Syrians seeking protection. One number that remains high, though, is that of lives lost at sea. In 2024, this was 2,452 people, according to the UN's International Organization for Migration. Slightly less than the previous year, but still a sign, says the UN, that safe legal routes are needed.
The European Union notes that it has a reform underway of asylum policies, new border procedures, new screening, faster returns, and so on, that it's due to take effect next year. So many are asking, is this new migration pact basically designed to deter migrants and bring the number of arrivals down? We put that question to Jessica Rosenkranz, the Swedish Minister for EU Affairs.
I think implementing the so-called migration pacts is one important step in making sure that we have a more restrictive migration volume that we can handle. But we need to take further steps moving forward. It's important in Europe, in Sweden, in Germany, that a yes is a yes when you seek asylum, but a no is also a no. And I think that will be a huge focus going forward, that if you get a no when you're asylum seeking, then you need to return to your country. And that hasn't worked up until now. And that, I think, will be a necessary step going forward with the revised return directive, that we need to make sure that decisions are respected and that we don't force people or see a situation where people actually, go underground, so to say, in escape of the decisions being taken. So migration pact being one important tool, but we need to look at new innovative solutions, increased return and more collaboration and partnerships with third countries, and making sure that we use a whole of society or whole of government approach where we integrate migration policy in foreign aid and trade relations and all other tools that we have available.
Let's get more on this now with Susan Fratzke. She's a senior policy analyst with the Migration Policy Institute. That's a Washington-based think tank, and is joining us today from Berlin. Thanks for being with us. Susan, what's your reaction to, first of all, to the Libyan Coast Guard firing at that rescue ship in the Mediterranean?
I think it's obviously deeply concerning. This is a boat that was there to save lives, to rescue people who were in distress and were unable to continue with the search that they were conducting. And we no longer know what happened to the boat that they were trying to rescue. And of course, obviously, the actions of the Libyan Coast Guard put the lives at risk of the people who were on the vessel. It's worth noting, though, that while this is a particularly serious incident, this isn't the first time this has happened. There have been other instances where there were reports that the Libyan Coast Guard has fired on or fired near rescue vessels or engaged in other threatening acts. So this is clearly not something that's happened in isolation.
In light of these incidents that you just described, do you think that Europe's cooperation with Libya on this is sustainable?
I think there's a question of what we mean by sustainable. I think clearly there are a lot of concerns about how Europe's cooperation with Libya is being conducted, what the consequences are in terms of the support that's being provided for the Libyan authorities and where that support is going and how it's being implemented. That being said, I have a lot of doubts about whether or not anything will change. Meloni in Italy has been very clear that they see their cooperation with the Libyan authorities as being successful. The numbers of individuals who have been crossing the Mediterranean and reaching Italy are down. So far, the European Commission, which is also, of course, engaged in cooperation with the Libyan Coast Guard, has declined to come out with any sort of firm statements about consequences of these actions, and has said they're awaiting an investigation from the Libyan authorities. So while I think there's reason to be concerned about the consequences of this activity in particular for the lives of people who are being rescued and the rescue boats that are operating in the Mediterranean, I'm not sure that anything will change, certainly in the short term, in terms of the support that's being provided, because the political incentives, migration is an incredibly sensitive issue for most European governments at the moment, and the political incentives are such that I doubt that any of the countries who are involved in supporting the efforts of the Libyan Coast Guard at the moment are likely to change course, at least in the short term.
So what alternatives could Europe pursue to deter uncontrolled migration and save lives without empowering abusive actors?
Well, this is a complex phenomenon, but there are a number of different options that exist. I mean, I think, as we'd already heard, the UN has been pointing to the fact that the circumstances that drive people to leave their homes and cross the Mediterranean are quite complex. The boat that the SOS Mediterranean was attempting to rescue, and then the boat they had rescued previously had a number of individuals from Sudan on it. And who followed the situation in Sudan. One of the challenges there is not just the conflict, but the fact that international aid has been dramatically cut since the U.S. cut their humanitarian assistance. The U.S. was one of the main providers of humanitarian assistance. European countries have typically provided less, and that's now driving people to leave their homes. So one thing that can be done is really look at, what is pushing people to leave when situations of safety. And on one hand, that is going to be these cuts to not just development assistance, but in particular humanitarian assistance to UN agencies. So we can rescale, look at ways to better provide and scale up humanitarian assistance. Another thing that can be done is really, looking for ways to provide safe disembarkation. And EU countries have done that in the past, but we need to resolve some of these thorny political questions around who is disembarked where, and there are options available to do that with the cooperation of the UN.
Thorny political questions indeed on migration. Susan Fratzke with the Migration Policy Institute, thank you very much.
Thank you.